You're listening to Career Interrupted. This is your host, Joy Foster. And today I have the lovely Annie Ridout with us. She is a writer, a poet, an author. She's also an online course creator, and she has many, many talents. And I'm really excited that she's here today to talk about the career interruptions that she's had and the impact that they have had on her very interesting career. So Annie, welcome to the show. Let's start by talking about your career interruptions. How many have you had, and which ones have been quite significant for you?
I have had too many to count, I think, but the first one was when I had my first baby 10 years ago. I was working as a copywriter. I had a full-time job on a rolling contract, a very good day rate that I would still be happy with today. And I had assumed that I would take some time away from that job, and then I maybe would work from home doing the same job, which I very easily could have done from home. And so when HR called me into their office and said, "We hear you're pregnant and you need to understand that as soon as you go to have your baby, your contract will be terminated," I was quite shocked and really upset. And 10 years ago, we didn't have organizations like Pregnant Then Screwed supporting women like me it was pregnancy discrimination. So I was very much on my own. But what happened, so that was a big interruption because I lost my job because I was having a baby. But then I had my baby and was just completely in love with her and didn't want to be parted from her ever. I didn't want to be doing a 9 to 6 job in the city, which is what I have been doing. So I designed a career that I could do from home. It took some years to work it out. So I had to find work that I could do from home. I trained as a journalist. I started writing articles as a freelance journalist, but it was quite bitty. I'd get a commission, and then it's all kind of slow and a bit of money here, a bit of money there. So I launched my own platform, parenting platform, and that kind of unexpectedly took off. There were lots of parents who wanted similar kind of the same kind of articles I wanted to be reading. So I wrote them and I interviewed loads of people, and the platform grew and led to me getting my first book deal. But I got my book deal when I had had my second baby. So I'd had a baby, and that had interrupted the parenting platform I was running. I'd created 3 months worth of content because I published an article a day so that I could have this first 3 months with my second baby. I still had a 2-year-old, a toddler. And it was lovely, but actually for me, it got hard at the 3-month point when suddenly he wasn't a sleepy newborn baby. He was much more active and needed more attention. And suddenly I had to get back to work. And that was a very kind of stressful period of trying to create this content, churn it out, potty train my toddler, look after my newborn. I had my daughter, when she was 2, was in nursery 2 days a week, but I still had the baby with me. So I just had no proper childcare at all. So, but then I pitched to write a book. That felt like a good idea. And it was a good idea and it was exciting. And I got the commission to write The Freelance Mum. And then just after that was published, in fact, at my launch party, I realized I was pregnant with my third baby. So the career interruptions have been very much pregnancy, childbirth related. At that point, I was also working for a tech app. I was a co-founder, and that all went very wrong when I had my third baby. I won't go into details, it's a long story, but I realized that the only way I could work around my 3 children was to hold the reins and to not have someone with power over me who could take my job away because I was pregnant, which had then happened twice. So I launched an online course off the back of my book. People were asking more about how to get press coverage for their business. So I turned it into an online course and was amazing.
That was the first course I did with you,
Yeah.
And I read The Freelance Mum, and I was like, I'm so glad someone put all of this information into a book, because I remember reading it thinking, like, because I'd experienced all of it. I sort of read it having experienced it myself, and thinking this is such a great book to explain what it's like to, do what freelancers have to do, which is, market themselves and all the practical stuff as well. So So you built this. So you started doing you did your first online course, and then what happened?
Launched a course, had a baby, had an amazing period where my husband joined me to run the business. So we were working together. Everything was so fully shared: childcare, the business, cooking, housework, everything for the first time since we'd had children. He used to just go out to work. And it was this lovely period. Then the next interruption was the pandemic, which was the following March. We went into lockdown. And actually, I'd also had my third baby was very ill as a 3-month-old baby. He was in hospital in intensive care. But that's like these things you just, it's so massive at the time. It was so traumatic and big, and he was so ill, but you just have to deal with it and then get back to work. So it
but I think it's fair to say, though, that these career interruptions you've just described, 3 children, then a very ill child, and then also the pandemic. I mean, it affected men in a certain way. It affected women in a completely different way. And I think what you're describing here is how pregnancy affects women in a way it does not affect men. And an ill child, might affect a man in a way that a pregnancy won't. And I say might because I also know there's a lot of people who go through those challenges and they're still the one that's doing all the hospital runs and everything else. So, I think this podcast is trying to highlight is that there is no straight line career for a woman, really. I mean, I have yet to meet a woman who's come on and said, yep, I started a job and 40 years later, I'm still in the same job. And not that happens for men either, but
that's interesting. Yeah. But they don't have the same periods of maternity, paternity leave as we do. It was me at the hospital every day. My husband did come in the evenings. I guess he was working the day. I don't know. I didn't even care what he was doing. I was with the baby, but I was definitely with the baby.
Yeah.
Staying overnight nearby. So it was very much, those early months, years, it was so the responsibility was so much on me, and I chose for it to be. That's what I wanted. I wouldn't have wanted to not be at the hospital with my baby. But then we went into the pandemic, and that was really good business-wise because we were teaching people how to shift their businesses online. But it was stressful. It was, my baby had been in intensive care with a virus that was very similar to COVID. So the fear of him getting ill again. And he did. The first day of lockdown, I was back in A&E with him. And everyone was like in masks. The cleaners in the hospital wouldn't touch the doors. It was such a strange experience. There was no one waiting in A&E. So we'd been taken in an ambulance through this back door. It was bizarre. And the doctor just said, just go home. In case he hasn't got COVID, you're better off at home.
Yeah.
So we went back and rode the pandemic and, anxious, but also some lovely, we came together as a family. My older 2 siblings developed a really beautiful connection. They were 5 and 3 in that time, sort of digging up mud in the garden and making potions. So there was some really nice, we were lucky. We didn't get really ill. We were lucky. Our work continued. We couldn't be furloughed because our business was so new, which didn't feel lucky, but it kept us focused on something outside of the fact that we were trapped at home. So
and you also moved to the country in this time period as well from London. So you went from...
That was after the lockdown. So after the second lockdown in 2021 was in the January to the April. I had another book come out called Shy, and a bit of an underwhelming launch because there was no book launch, no physical book launch. And I'd really enjoyed that side of it with the freelance mum. And so that came out, and then I just burnt out. We'd had, in the January of that year, we'd gone into lockdown, and my sister had said, we're going into lockdown again. I was like, no, we're not. My children are going back to school and nursery. I'm getting back to business. She was right, and we did go into lockdown, and I found that I really struggled with that second one. Now it was winter, it was dark, it was miserable. We were still trapped at home, and we launched a product that was too expensive, and no one bought it. And it was the first time in our nearly 2 years of business that had happened. Everything had just flown off the shelf. Amazingly, we'd been really lucky. And we made a business mistake. And where usually you're allowed, you will make mistakes and you will fail as an entrepreneur. I wasn't ready for that, and I couldn't cope with it. I didn't have the capacity to cope with failure at that exact point. And so that happened. And then I started to spiral a little bit and just not feel motivated. Ideas stopped dropping in. And then my book came out. And after that, I just sort of crashed and spent some time sitting on the sofa, not doing very much, before we came up with the idea that we would leave London and do the pandemic thing that so many people did and move from London, the city, the polluted city, to the lovely countryside. So we did that, and I just shelved the business. I didn't properly shut it down. I thought about selling it. I explored that option. and had lots of conversations, and then I couldn't quite let go of it because I'd gone through this dark period of hating the business because it was easier to pin everything on the business than the pandemic or motherhood or finding it hard relocating or anything. It was easy to just go, it's all the business's fault. That's why I'm in this situation. It was nothing to do with my online course business. Well, not nothing, but that was the good thing in my life. That was a really positive thing. But I sort of flipped it to a negative in my head and paused it and decided to just write poetry for a year. So I moved to the countryside and earned an income as a poet and selling books on a market stall, and I was commissioned by some corporate companies to write poems. Then I left the countryside. We did 2 years there, then I moved back, and that was another big interruption. So now I'm living in London, and then my kid came out of school because it's not for him, the school environment, to still go to school, and one is at home. So that's been another adjustment career-wise, working out how to accommodate him being here some of the time, and we have support the rest of the time.
So that is a plethora of career interruptions, which is why you're the perfect guest for this podcast. Where would, in all of those situations, where do you think the stakes were the highest for you?
I guess like business-wise, that period where the course flopped and suddenly our entire family of 5 was living off the income purely from online courses. I wasn't even coaching at that point. I trained to be a coach a bit later in the year. So financially, I was really panicked. We'd actually saved loads of money because we weren't going out, we weren't going on holiday, and the business was bringing in enough that we had this lovely chunk of savings, which I then lived on for a period while the poetry side was taking off. So business-wise, that felt really stressful. My husband went back to his work outside of the home. But in terms of the emotional side and the family side of things, probably this recent interruption of my son not being able to go to school because it's ongoing. We don't know if he'll ever return to a setting of some sort. So I was thinking about this morning. I'm an obsessively organized person, but I only have the capacity to deal with a certain amount of organizing. And at this time of the year, there is a huge amount for most parents. And when you add on a kid who isn't at school, so even though we're so lucky because my parents help 2 days a week, we are able to afford for a childminder to come 1 day a week. My husband and I each do a day a week. So most of the home educating families, the mother has given up her career to focus on being with her children. That's really common, and I don't have to do that, and I'm grateful because I don't want to do that. I want to have my career. And also for my son, it feels good that he's looked after by different people and has some variety. But I do all the planning. I do all the planning and all the logistics. And so it's added a huge weight in terms of organization. And also just the fact that I want to check he's okay all the time. He seems really happy, like he was really unhappy in school. He's really happy now. But I did spend between January and May before I took him out. He joined a new school. We hoped it would work out better. At first it did, and then it didn't. And I cried a lot during that period. But I was also the only earner during that period. And weirdly, so I got back into online courses during this time. I created a course called The Creative Way, which was my new business model that I follow, where I only share creative content on Instagram, poetry, passages, more recently illustrations. And then some of my community there follow me over to Substack for my longer form essays. Some of those people kindly pay each month a small fee, £3.50 a month, to read the essays. Some of them join my online courses and some sign up for coaching. And it all starts with my art, but it feeds into my business in a way that works for me and feels aligned. So I launched that course, The Creative Way, in May as things were difficult for my son, or maybe it was March, and it just blew up. And I didn't realize I didn't know that people were still up for online courses. There had been a dip, which you and I have spoken about, post-pandemic. In the pandemic, we were all signing up for courses and learning and excited, and then we were just done with it and wanted the real world. And now, it's such an amazing way to learn. It's so flexible. Online courses, especially for women working from home, you can do it often in your own time, in the evenings, fit it in the day. So I launched this course, and other people obviously looking for a different way to show up online and different ways to earn money from home. And it did really well. So I was sort of going between the business was back on, my son was finding things harder and harder, and then I was ghostwriting a book, and then my son was finding things harder again, and then suddenly he was out of school. So I was going between the business that was doing quite well and the home life that felt very difficult. There wasn't much sleep during that period.
What would you say the biggest fear or doubt that's come in this particular situation, this most recent one, but also when you think back to that moment when the course that you put out there, you raised the price, it failed, and those two places, what are the fears and doubts that come into your head when you're facing those challenges?
I think there's always a money fear for me. And like, we're fine, especially now that we're both working separately. We don't have all our eggs in one basket. But with the course not doing well, the fear was now we're not going to have enough money to live. And I let myself spiral in a really not very useful way, because everything was actually fine. It was just one course that didn't do well. But that's how I felt. I was like, that's it. I've now failed. I can't run a business anymore. I hate business. I hate this business. It's ruined my life. And what's the point? I still do that now. So on my Substack, I have I've got like 8,000 free subscribers and 500 paid subscribers. And recently I had a little dip in paid subscribers. And I can see that we're coming to the end of the year. It's a time when people might go, actually, do I want these subscriptions? Maybe before the end of the year, I'll cancel. Like, it makes sense that people would be thinking this way. But I went into massive panic mode and I was like, that's it. Substack's over for me. I'm leaving, I'm canceling, and I'm leaving Instagram, and I'm shutting everything down, and I'm going private, and I'm going to go and just have a career. So no one.
I love your raw honesty on that, though, because I think there's people who are listening to this that they're like, oh, thank God I'm not the only one that feels that way. That is so brilliant. I love it.
I can hear myself, but I also, I've been doing this for some years now. I've been working for myself for years, and I still can slip into that. And my dad just laughs. And he always likes to talk about how we can have so many good days and then one bad day and we think it's all over. And that's me.
Yeah. Well, I think that's most people. So I think the good news is, right. I mean, I think that's one of the reasons that I think it's so important to work on the mindset side of things, because it's a game changer when you do. So what was the most surprising thing that sort of came out of these career interruptions and really was something you weren't expecting, that's been a positive element of it?
I think I always wanted to be a mother, and that was my main driver in life, was to be a mother, to have a baby, to have children, to have a family. And I really sometimes have to pull it back to that and just remember this was everything that I wanted. But I also did a BA degree in English and a master's in journalism, and I worked hard on the education side of things. And then I worked hard to get into being a professional writer, being paid to write. So then when I had my baby, I knew I couldn't let my career go. But there were long periods where I probably didn't think that I could actually earn a good living as a writer while also being the type of mother that I wanted to be. And I have managed to do that. And so I think that's been one of the most surprising things, that I won't speak for in general or for anyone else. I really wanted to do it, and I have been able to do it. And I feel like when I reflect on that, I feel proud. I'm also quite stressed quite a lot of the time. And this morning, my husband left really early and I was doing everything for all the children and working out who's going where and packing things and blah, blah, blah. And I was being not the best version of myself at all. And I thought, if I was focusing solely on motherhood, would this be so stressful? Is it? Because it possibly would be. But I think it was because all I want to be doing is sitting and writing poems, just have someone else dealing with the boring logistics, and to just, or maybe like my husband, just go off to work. That would be quite nice, to just disappear and have someone else deal with I love being with my kids, and I love the communication. They're so funny, they're so creative. I love watching them make art. I don't really make it with them, but the logistics I find so boring, and the having to remember. My daughter's got into this new thing of saying, Mum, I've got to remember that I need the outfit tomorrow. Make a reminder. Mum, I need to ask my friend how she emails her friends. set a reminder. And she's so used to me, anything they bring to me, I'm like, I'm going to set a reminder. Stop talking. I'm setting a reminder.
We flipped it on the head in this house. So our daughter will say, I need to remember this, or you need to do this for me. Like, I need you.
Yeah.
And then we'll say to her, okay, put it in the family WhatsApp group. That's our reminder that we have to do it. Yeah. So no, so that's really interesting. But the surprising part is the fact that even despite all of these challenges that you have faced, you have got to a place and you've navigated to a place where you are a mother and you have a career as a writer, and being able to recognize that it was not a straightforward path, but you're there. I think that is beautiful.
I also still panic all the time, and I have these dips and I'm like, what am I doing? I'm doing too many different things and I want to simplify, and then I simplify and then I get bored, and so I have to diversify. So it's not like I've done it. And
I can see why a creative person would struggle with the logistics.
Well, this is it. There's so much going on at home that then it feels like if at least my career was just one thing, like I just did a podcast and that's it, it would be so pleasingly simple. Or
that is not how life works.
No, it's not. And it's not. Yeah, it's not how online business works, is it? You have to do lots of things, I think.
What's the core lesson that you've learned as you've gone through all of this?
I really believe that if you set your heart on something and you work really hard, I think most of us can achieve most things. And so I think that's my core lesson. And that's what I have to remind myself, that if I want to have a book of my poems published, which is like a long-term dream, I've self-published, I would love a book, a poetry collection published, then you just have to like work really hard to make that happen and persevere. People give up too quickly. So I think my lesson is that you persevere. I say, having had a course flop and decide that I have to shut my business, but that was a slow unraveling.
But you came back and you created other courses and you've started selling those again. So I think even though you've gone through, and I think, from a neurocoaching perspective, when I coach my clients on the neuroscience side and the subconscious reprogramming, it's actually to go back and say, because our mind wants to focus on the negative. It always does.
Yes.
So if we can create, what we do at TechPixies, we create these brain primes. But if we can create a brain prime that's based on brain-based evidence, which is, yes, I've created courses, and yes, some of them have thrived and some of them have flopped, but actually they've thrived again. And I can come back from a flop. And actually, if the dominating thought is I can come back from anything because I am creative and talented, that's the core belief that you start to believe. And, we know from neuroscience, it takes 67 days to rewire a thought. And so you have to be, I think when I hear the words work really hard, what I'm thinking is we've got to work really hard to change the narrative every day for 67 days until that new thought is so strong it takes over the old thought, and that becomes the dominating thought. And that's the thing that's hard for people, is to constantly put on that armor of, stand guard at the portal of your mind. That's what Ralph Waldo Emerson wrote. And I think it's such an important thing to remember, that it's very, very easy it's easy to spiral. It's easy to go negative. Yes. It's very hard to think a certain way. And that certain way is positive, uplifting, and built on brain-based evidence that I have come through challenges before, and I can come through every challenge that I face because I turn challenges into opportunities. And when we start to believe, it really shifts it shifts us on a cellular level, on a molecular level. And I think it's
also, taking some positive action. Like when recently I lost some paid subscribers on Substack, I thought there was a tech glitch because I had never lost that big a chunk in one go. And there wasn't. They just decided to leave, which is fine. And I started to spiral. And then I thought, hold on, what's going on here? What do I want from this situation? And what I want is for my community to feel that they want to stay supporting me and reading my writing and, supporting it so that they can do that. And so I decided that what I wanted to do was to make the people who had decided to stay, who committed, I wanted to give them a gift that was a true gift, not a half gift where it's 50% off my courses, so I'm still earning, a proper gift. And so I did, and I sent an email out with a gift that was just about them receiving and was not about me receiving. And I didn't know if anyone would care, if anyone would use it, but there was a really positive response and it felt amazing. And then it didn't matter to me that those people had left. It mattered to me that the people who stayed were happy to be there and had enjoyed this gift that I'd sent out. And so that was a reminder that you can, if you're feeling like things aren't going so well, find a way to make them go well for someone else. And that can just have a really nice circular sort of positive.
That is what it is. It's the law of circulation, giving and receiving. You can't just give, you must, but if you give or you receive, you instigate that law, but someone must receive when you give. And likewise, you must, so it's the art of being a good giver and a gracious receiver, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Is there a motto that you live by?
A motto? Well, I guess to link back to what I said earlier, it would probably be something around you can do and be anything that you want to be and do. You can be whoever you want to be if you set your heart on it, do the work. That's a bit of a long one, isn't it? You probably wanted something snappier.
No, I think that's perfect. I think it completely fits with your amazing story. Thank you for coming on the podcast and sharing your story with us. Where can people find you if they'd like to read your writing and connect with you?
So my Substack is my name, annieridout.substack.com, or you can go to my website, annieridout.com, and it links through there. My courses are there as well. And then I'm on Instagram at Annie Ridout, where I share poetry and passages. And if you are raising neurodivergent children and you're looking for support or solidarity on that side of things, I've got another account called Raising Neurodivergence.
And do you have a poem that you could share with us before we wrap up?
You want me to read a poem?
I'd love that.
Right. Here's one I shared yesterday. It's just a short one. I may not say I love you, but show love in other ways, like a beautifully laid table and fresh flowers in a vase. I'll nourish you through meals that will warm you to your bones, and I'll whisper to you gently, this will always be your home.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. I think that's a good place to close. I appreciate you coming on.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Well, I love that. And I hope you enjoyed that poem. It was a last minute request that I thought I would ask, and she graced us with it. Thank you for listening to the Career Interrupted podcast. I have really been enjoying the interviews that I've been doing. And so thank you for listening. Thank you for also sharing it and for writing back. We get some lovely notes in the support inbox, support@techpixies.com, once people have listened to the podcast or watched the podcast. So please carry on letting us know your thoughts and feedback on it. I'm grateful to you for listening. Have a wonderful rest of your week, and we'll see you at the same time, same place next week. Bye for now.